Welcome, everyone, to another awesome episode of the Average Ontario Anglers Fishing Podcast. I'm your host today. My name is Andrew, and as a co-host, we have Jesse. And he waved for all you audio listeners.
Hello,
Now,
people.
we have a cool topic for you today, which we're going to get into. I don't know what Jesse's going to call this episode, but it might be something like, you've probably heard it before on our podcast if you're a returning listener, buy once, cry once. And it's going to be all about certain things where it's kind of worth it to spend the extra money on it. Like Japanese glide bait. So we're going to be going into that main topic in just a little bit. But to get us started, I'm going to also do the interesting fishing facts. Now, the reason why normally we kind of switch the roles, or who's doing the interesting fishing facts and whatnot, but Jesse is just getting over being sick, so we thought we're going to save his voice for as long as possible. Otherwise, you're going to hear the last half of an episode of being just me, and trust me, nobody wants that.
Bless you, my child.
So I'm going to launch right away into our interesting fishing fact. Now, something that unfortunately I haven't done in a few years, and I'm not sure if I ever did it with Jesse around, but when I lived in Beaverton back in the day, I would go down to the Beaver River, the river of beavers, and I would start catching crayfish in like the deep shallows. Now, the reason why I was doing it, at first I started catching them in Lake Simcoe and in the creeks just for fun. And then I started doing it because I saw Reno Viola do it on a Fish in Canada show, and I'm like, I should use crayfish as live bait. And then they always just crawled underneath a rock and I lost them. And then I started doing it because I wanted to eat them. Now, for any of you who are thinking, why would you eat those bugs of the sea? Like, guess what? Lobsters are bugs of the sea. They're delicious. So what's the difference between a crayfish and a lobster? Not much. In fact, if you've ever been down to the States or around the world, crayfish or crawfish, they're exactly the same thing, just a slightly different name, just like pickerel and walleye are the same thing. It's walleye. Walleye's right. So crayfish and crawfish are the same thing. So you might think of crawfish gumbo or crawfish boil pot or something like that down in the States. It's very popular, very delicious. And I was able to have some down there, and I also had some more recently when I catch my own, and I just washed them up. And I was kind of thinking, how many different ways are there to catch crayfish? How popular is it of a menu item kind of thing? And then I started thinking, I wonder if I could get enough recipes to kind of do a Bubba Gump shrimp thing. I'm talking about all the different ways to have shrimp, but with crayfish. Now, I'm going to say these sound a lot better than just like steamed crayfish, boiled crayfish, crayfish on rice. Like, that's good. But here are some really interesting recipes that I would love to have. First one is a classic. I've had versions of it, is a Cajun crawfish boil, popular in the USA. It's a southern classic where crayfish are boiled with corn, potatoes, and a mix of Cajun spices. In China, they have the Chinese mala crawfish, which is a spicy Szechuan-style stir-fried crayfish with chili peppers, garlic, and Szechuan peppercorns. Then there's crayfish étouffée from Louisiana, a creamy, elegant crayfish bisque that's often served as a starter in the French cuisine. That just sounds awesome. Australian crayfish with garlic butter. It's whole crayfish that are grilled and basted with garlic butter. Mexican crayfish tacos. Crispy tacos with crayfish, obviously. A Canadian dish that I had never heard of before, but is just like any other Canadian dish where they're like, this is good, let's just put it on top of poutine. Crayfish poutine. That got Jesse's attention. In Thailand, you have the Thai crayfish curry, red or green curry with crayfish, coconut milk, and aromatic Thai spices. Like, all these sound awesome. How about you? Would you eat these, Jesse?
Yeah, I guess it's just this. Like, everyone thinks that crayfish are, like, in this area anyway, it's just something that you generally wouldn't eat. Like, you see them scuttling along the bottom of the river, or you picture them as some bait that you'd use to catch fish. But in this part of the world anyway, in Ontario, it's not something you commonly see people eat. But again, like you said, I was actually just watching that show on Disney Plus, Uncharted, with Gordon Ramsay. If you've never seen that show, Absolutely watch it. It's amazing. And he goes different parts of the world and tries different things. I actually just watched the episode, funny enough, where he went to Louisiana and he's cooking all different kinds of stuff. And one of the things he had was crayfish, and just watching them dump it into the pot and they change bright red, and all the corn and potatoes and all the spices they added in it. It actually looked amazing. So I definitely would try it. I'm one of those guys that I'll try anything once to a certain extent. When it comes to food, I'll try anything once. And sometimes things look gross, but they taste amazing. So yeah, I definitely try it. It sounds good. Half of those sounded really good.
Yeah.
They all sounded good, but some of those, like the Thai one, that sounded good.
And one of the things that I used to do, because I wanted to cook it, I was trying to make myself mini lobster dishes with them when I was making them myself. And so the easiest way I found to cook crayfish was, first is a little bit of prep with them. See, I catch them in the creek. Normally I found the best way to do it was I'd put on some leather gloves, flip over a rock, you see crayfish there. I'd kind of like tantalize it with one hand in front and have my other hand just come up behind them and grab them. And if you're wearing leather gloves, you can just grab it wherever. I'd put it in a little bait bucket on my side and then just catch, 20, 30, 40 of these things. As long as their tails were the size of my pinky, it was big enough for me to cook and eat.
You sound like a kidnapper. You're just like the crawdad kidnapper. Andrew's like, I put on my leather gloves and I tantalize them from the front, and then I come up from behind and grab them.
That's terrible.
Then
That's
I throw them in my
image.
sack. The legend of the little crayfish. They keep telling stories about Andrew to this day.
Doom doom, Criminal Minds.
That's the wrong show.
I don't care. So once you have enough of your crayfish, getting back on topic here, away from child kidnapping, my goodness, we're talking about eating here, deliciousness. So I get all my crayfish, and you put them in a bucket of salt water. So you take a 5-gallon pail, put in like half a cup of salt, and you stir them around, let them sit in that salt water, and it purges them out. So they'll start expelling anything that's in them, and it also washes them off of any debris. Then you put a bunch of Cajun seasoning, or even just salt if you want it really just straight crayfish flavor, in a pot of boiling water. You bring it to boil. You put your cleaned crayfish now into that pot live. You cover it. You let it boil for, leave it off. You boil it for 5 minutes with the crayfish in there. Once it's boiled for 5 minutes, you take it off heat, put a lid on, and you let it sit for 15 to 20 minutes. And these crayfish, they've already turned bright red after the boiling session. And the longer they sit in the water, the more the flavor of whatever you season the water with is actually soaked up into the meat. And then you can just pop the tails off, pop a couple of those ribs off, and the tail meat comes out, and it tastes like lobster, but is more the consistency of like shrimp or crab or something. It's a bit more tender than a lobster tail, I find. But you put that in some garlic butter, delicious. So anyways, that's my experience of having crayfish. I know people that I've talked to, they always think I'm weird for eating it, but I'm like, if you go into the States, it's a staple down there. Like crawfish, gumbo, and eating crawfish and boils, that's just what is done. It's so classic.
It's like a delicacy down there.
Yeah. So it's one of those things where if you haven't tried it, I recommend it. Try it with just a few to start, and if you like it, maybe try and get more later. But anyways, that's a little interesting fishing fact, especially when the fishing is slow. If you don't have enough fish for a fish fry, try
Put on
your
leather gloves. Slowly lower yourself into the water. Don't make any noise. And kidnap a few crayfish. Andrew grew up in Beaverton. He had a lot of weird hobbies as a child, but we're not going to get into that today.
Yeah, that's on next week's episode or later episode of Myths and Legends stuff.
I thought before we get into the main topic, I could just do a little story time.
Absolutely.
Because generally, what we do is we record a lot of these episodes a few weeks before they actually come out. But since we pretty much do that so we can have our vacation, not have to worry about deadlines and stuff like that. So what happened was last weekend, Andrew was at his cottage trip, which we'll talk a little bit about. And the last 2 weekends I was camping. So we actually haven't recorded in almost a month, which is crazy. Yeah. But as we're recording this episode is coming out this weekend. So it's very, very fresh. So anything I talk about right now is very, relevant to what's going on. So I thought I could talk about my fishing trip, and then we could talk a little bit about Andrew's fishing trip just quick because, next week's episode is actually pretty intense. We probably won't have time to talk about it. So I actually went camping at Algonquin 2 weekends ago. I went for 3 nights, 4 days with my brother-in-law and some other guys that I know. We had a good time. It did rain every single day. In fact, the Friday, we got there Thursday. The Friday, it actually poured like 20 millimeters of rain. It was absolutely terrible for, I'd say, most of the day. It was pretty bad. But other than that, it was a good trip. It was good. We had my sports pal, and I was pulling actually another canoe. And I had a little tow system rigged up on my sports pal. It's a little tugboat now. Just pull the canoe across the lake. Got some pretty interesting looks from the purists, the canoeists going by at Algonquin, but I don't care. This is vacation. It's supposed to be fun. It's not supposed to be tiring. That was a good trip, Algonquin. And then the second trip, I actually went up near North Bay, and I booked this trip. And the reason I did, it was a backcountry trip on a small lake, and there's muskie in this lake. And I really was like, you know what? If I can catch one muskie on this trip, I'm going to be happy. It's a 3-day trip. My wife ended up getting sick. She was supposed to come. I ended up going with the other couple that we were supposed to go with. Anyway, long story short, the trip got cut really short. We got there Thursday. I fished Thursday about 2 hours. I ended up catching a decent sized muskie, about 34 inches, which is pretty nice within 2 hours of fishing. That's pretty sick on a new lake. And then the next day I fished and caught nothing, but I did have a bunch of follows, which was a little bit frustrating, but it's nice to see, multiple fish in a day on a new lake, especially. And the next day they had to leave early, and I was supposed to stay till Sunday, but I had this like weird feeling that I should go home. And I didn't know why. And I was like, I should go home. And they're like, well, it might rain and blah, blah, blah. And I ended up going home. And on the way home, I started feeling really ill. And when I got home, I was like just shivering. When you get like a fever and you're just like, you're freezing all of a sudden. And I like dove into bed, woke up the next day with like a terrible fever. Turns out I got COVID, which was fun. So I'm glad I got home, because imagine trying to, pack up backcountry and get across the lake and drive home, just being in like, the shivering, stage of a terrible fever and stuff like that.
I couldn't imagine trying to like camp in the tent hammock being that cold at night in like up north, because it wasn't warm that weekend either.
No, it was
weekend that you went is the start weekend I started
cold
the
front
cottage trip.
Yeah. And I'm actually glad that I got home, because that day it poured rain crazy. But I did end up getting sick, which is not fun. But I did end up catching one muskie, so I was pretty happy with myself. And it's on a lake that me and Andrew want to go back on. You ever get like a really good feeling about a lake, and you do a bunch of research and you talk to people and they're like, oh yeah, you got to fish this lake. And you talk to other people about it and they're like, yeah, you got to fish it. So the lake was everything everyone told me. And I caught one muskie, that's good for any trip for me anyway. But I did see 4 other muskie that followed my lure, and they were following really deep. Like you'd see them just at the last minute at the end of a figure 8, like 7-8 feet down. You're like, oh, and you're trying different baits and everything. But it was a great trip. And Andrew wasn't there because he was at his cottage trip. So tell us a bit about that.
So the cottage trip was awesome. And this is the cottage where Jess and I would go to growing up, and we would fish like hardcore 16, 18 hours a day sometimes. Like it was, we were
Who
crazy.
needs to eat?
Yeah. Nowadays when I go up there, it's more of a relaxing, like peaceful place for me to just wind down. So fishing is always on the agenda for me. I cut it down to maybe fishing 4 to 6 hours a day instead of 8 to 12.
Yeah.
Make the wife happy, spend some time with the friends. And so we went up there with some buddies. So we got up there on Saturday, pouring rain on and off, and same thing Sunday, pouring rain. I didn't get a chance to launch the boat. Normally we do that on the day we arrive. So it was Sunday, enough of the break in the rain. I'm okay, let's go down to the boat launch in town. I'll launch the boat. Just as I'm untying the boat, I look down and I see daylight to the bottom of my hull as I'm hooking up my battery connections.
Oh.
I'm like, oh great, I have another giant split in my hull. So I don't launch it. I had some JB welds with me, so I took the putty and I put it on and tried to get it working. And it does works in wet environments, but it was rainy, so I covered it and I had the boat propped up so it would be dry-ish while I applied it. So anyways, I had 2 splits. One is like a 3-inch split, one's like a 2-inch split right beside a rivet. I launched the boat the next day after I wait your time of 12 hours or whatever it is. And the boat, I can feel it like dragging on the one side in the water as I'm driving. I'm like, this isn't good. So I open up the hatch for the battery as I look in, and there's like a geyser coming out of the floor as I'm driving this boat.
Oh no.
And I'm like, well, I got to get there now. So I get back to the cottage then and pull the boat up on shore as much as I can. The back end's still hanging in the water because it's too heavy with all the decking and the big motor I have on there. Like, I can't lift it by hand. So anyways, it turned out that, sure enough, part of my JB weld had just come right off of the smaller of those two cracks. It didn't hold at all. I don't know why. Usually this stuff works good. So I drove to Barry's Bay, which is like a half hour away, and then we got some flex paste. Good old Phil Swift here. I sawed this boat in half, and I figured I should do a 3-inch split then. All right. So I took that. That stuff, I will say, is really cool because it can cure underwater. So you don't have to lift it out of the water, which I couldn't do. So you can just like spread it on underwater and it cures in 24 hours.
Just like a paste.
Yeah, it's like you put it on like putty on a wall, but it's like thick rubber paste.
Interesting.
So it worked really well. I did see like the edges and stuff, they're peeling and hanging off now, but it's still all the way to the end of the trip. No more water came in the boat. So I waited 24 hours and then ran the big motor. Speaking of towing people, we were towing our friends and my wife and stuff on the paddleboard. Going a full like 35 kilometers an hour on a paddleboard behind a boat is pretty fun.
That's crazy.
But getting to the fishing side, fishing was slow. It was slow. Usually I'll catch what I caught there in a couple days, and it took me all week to kind of power through it. But we caught about 7 catfish in total, right from the dock. So you had a good catfish sandwich fry, which everyone really liked. And then I was able to catch some pretty decent smallmouth that trip, actually. I caught a couple small largemouth, and I was trying to focus on fishing big baits. So it's another reason why I didn't catch as many fish cold front, and then I'm only fishing or trying to focus on fishing big baits. And I will say I did get a bunch of follows. I got one pike is like 23 inches, and it just nailed my Hashimoto Concepts like 3-jointed glide bait. The thing looks amazing in the water, I will say. It looks awesome. So I was really happy I got one on that. And then the biggest smallie of the trip came on an old meadow mouse, which
nice.
Jesse always told me for years about like the meadow mouse and stuff like that. But it's a classic bait from like the 70s. I think it's the Hedden made it, didn't it? I believe. But it's like a flocked lure.
I actually have one right here.
Yeah.
It's my dad's old meadow mouse. Yeah.
So it's like a shallow diving crankbait kind of thing, and it floats too. So when you stop reeling, it has this like shimmy as it comes up backwards, and it's fishing this big rock slide that had come into the river. And I just nailed a 3-pound, 5-ounce smallie, and it's again not absolutely massive, but for this river, it's a very good size. And it was one of the fattest, like roundest smallmouth. Like it wasn't as long as I was expecting for a 3.5-pounder almost, but that thing was dense.
It was a football, yeah.
But yeah, it was overall a great trip. We had some good fish fries still, and it was extremely relaxing. So I will say that it's nice not to be in a tent when it's raining. You have the whole cottage, or watching movies, or
yeah,
doing fun
I'll
things.
tell you, of my last 2 camping trips, it rained both trips, and being in a camp hammock, you may think it's sketchy, but even in pouring rain, like Noah's Ark style pouring rain, I'm in this little hammock, completely dry, above the water, no rain splashing on me. It was perfectly fine. And it's not pleasant going camping in a downpour because everything's wet and it's miserable and you can't dry anything out, but it is doable. And one of the things we're going to talk about today is one of the things that made my life the last 2 weeks so much better.
Absolutely. I know exactly what you're talking about. And this is getting us great segue, Jesse, right into our main topic. So one thing that I am looking to update on mine and my list of items is a raincoat. for a full rain outfit. I like having like, full pants and jacket necessary, especially on a camping trip when you don't. Your whole purpose is not to get wet in the first place because you can't dry them out if it's still raining.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. So,
I know that I myself, Jesse and I, we got a set of wet skins. They were on sale. So I have a set of wet skins. They've been doing me really well. For the price point, I have to say I'm like a really good, relatively budget option for a good set of like a rain suit. And it's comfortable. I've had it now for 4 years. It's showing some wear and tear, but I think I paid $80 for the jacket and pants.
yeah. I will say though, because this episode is about buy once, cry once, when I updated to an expensive raincoat, like a raincoat and a bib, it's night and day. It's night and day compared to like buying $100 set. So what I did is I ended up getting a few years ago the Sims Challenger bibs, and not cheap. Just the bibs were $300. And then last year my wife picked up the matching top for me. The cool thing is they go on sale all the time, because with Sims it's kind of like stupid fashion, right? So like they come out with patterns and colors, and then they're only available for like 1 year, and then the next year all those go on sale for like half price. You get rid of them, they bring in the next set of colors, right? So I ended up getting the top for $150. So if you bought the whole set brand new, yes, $600. Is that worth it? I wouldn't have paid that myself. I was glad to get the rain top on sale. But I'll tell you, for me personally, worth every penny. The bibs alone I wear generally, except if it's super hot, I will wear them from March all the way into the fall, even if I'm just in my canoe, even if it's not going to rain, because any water splashing on me, I'm not going to get wet. Now in the summer, I don't care about that because I instantly dry out. But the cool thing is, everyone always asks me, oh, why you wear those? You must be hot in those. Like, how many times have you heard people ask me like, oh, you must be hot in those? They're nice. They're breathable. Yeah. They're very comfortable, even in the summer. Like, yes. They're not like a cheap plastic rain bib. Like, these are nice, breathable Gore-Tex or something. They breathe like crazy. I'm 100% comfortable even in direct sunlight in the summer in those things. Again, not going to wear them in the summer if I don't have to. And the same with the top, right? So for me, I've been in absolutely terrible rain. Like me and Andrew this year, I don't know what it is.
You mean the last 2 years?
The last 2 years. But this year alone, even just talking about the last few months, it seems to have been raining every single time we go fishing. And not just a little bit. It's not like, oh, a little sprinkle. And there's people that are like, there's never bad weather when it's fishing. It's like, yeah, but if it's legit pouring like crazy sideways, that's a bad day. Like, that's terrible, right? So like, remember that trip we did bass opener a few months ago?
Yes,
I do. It poured so much that we had to put the bilge pump on in the boat. That's how much water was collecting in the boat. Like, if you weren't in a good raincoat, I'll tell you, at the end of the day, I was bone dry. I was wearing rubber boots, full bib, full raincoat, the kind that like zips up around your face with a huge hood going on it. I was bone dry at the end of the day. And I could have fished longer, even if it had been raining. I was perfectly comfortable.
I was comfortable again in the wet skins. I was comfortable majority of the day. By the end of the day, I was starting to get a bit of moisture coming in, and it wasn't as breathable. So when those warm spells would come in, like sun comes out right after rain, it's all that humid stuff. It would get a bit trapped. It wasn't as breathable as, again, it's not a rubber suit by any means, but it's not as breathable as the higher end stuff. And Jesse makes sure to rub that in when he's like, bone dry. Like, on the ride home, I have a couple wet sleeves, and he's just like, perfect.
Yeah. So again, it is more expensive. I'm not saying you have to buy Sims. Sims is kind of, it's a brand that I started buying back in the day when I used to work at sale, because I used to get ridiculous discounts. And I know it's expensive stuff, but in my experience, all their stuff for me, it lasts a long time. It's super high quality. And the fact that it lasts a long time, even though it's expensive, doesn't mean that it's a bad value. That's actually a really good value. Yep. Say you go through a cheap $100 rain suit every 3 years, or you buy one that's $300 that lasts you 10 years. You know, like, you have to add up how long it actually lasts, and then how good the quality is when you're actually wearing it. I'd rather wear something that maybe costs more if I can afford it. Maybe I splurge once in a while, but when I wear it, I'm like, I love this. Like, I put it on, I'm like, it looks good. Not that it matters. No one cares what you look like on the water, but you feel good. You feel confident. You have all the features that you want. and it just works really good. It's comfortable. And for me, a raincoat is one of those buy once, cry once things. It's not like you're only going to buy it once in your lifetime, but you buy a nice quality raincoat, you're going to have it for a long time, not just a few years, many years. So
I actually have my eyes on, again, cost-wise, it's going to be something I'm saving up for a while. But Under Armour has some really nice rain suits they brought out too. And it has like full bibs and stuff like that, and it's really breathable. So again, higher price point, but it's going to be something I'm going to use and will keep me comfortable on the water for years, because I don't foresee our unfortunate poor luck of always it raining when we go fishing stopping anytime soon.
Yeah. And one thing I will say is, again, you don't need to buy Sims. You don't need to buy any of these high-end brands. Look for sales. Wait till the end of the season. Look for sales at, growers at Gagnon Sports. I got my Sims for half price. Look around for sales. Get some good stuff. Other brands like Frog Togs. Like, I almost bought those until I found the deal in the Sims. Like, there's so many good brands that you can buy. And then my advice would be take care of them.
Yes.
Don't just have a raincoat and then crumple it up and throw it in your trunk or whatever. What I started doing is I fold them up, I roll them up, and then I have a dry bag, like one of those camping dry bags. And I put them inside, I fold it down and clip it up, and then I throw it in my boat or my trunk. So if I ever need it, it's there, it's protected. It's not just going to get ripped by some random thing in your boat or your truck or a hook or whatever.
And it's not wet on the inside of the liner because it's sitting in the bottom of your boat because it's in a dry bag.
So take care of them. And again, fishing is great in the rain, but if you don't have the proper equipment, especially like early and late in the year, you don't want to get wet because it'll be miserable. Yeah.
The other thing, just a quick side note, we'll get into it later on in the year, but even ice fishing gear, I'm really happy with. I just invested in a striker suit this past winter. So some things like that. Wearing good quality clothing for the elements is really good. As for your undershirt, I don't care. I shop at Value Village, Plato's Closet, Talese. I don't care. It's cheap stuff. When it comes to the things that actually help you to stay comfortable with the elements, those are things that are really good. To invest that money in.
Well, again, same with the float suits. Like we bought Striker. I bought my Striker 2 years before Andrew, and every time we went ice fishing, I'm completely warm. I've got my big boots on, and he's sitting there in his crappy Walmart boots and his little like hand-me-down like old ski I was
wearing
pants.
I will say the snow pants were meh, but the jacket I wore for years was actually Jesse's grandpa's old down jacket from. That's a
great jacket. Yeah.
From the Hudson Bay Company. Like it was an old coat.
It was warm, yeah.
The Hudson Bay Trading Company, by the way, not like the newer version of it. It was an old coat, but full down. That thing was a pullover too, and it was warm as heck. Yeah. So again, you can get some good deals, but and having the good equipment is. Now, talking about being comfortable on the boat, tell me if this sounds familiar, any of our listeners. You're out there, you're fishing, you've got your tin boat or you've got your canoe and you got your little electric motor going on in the back and you're trying to cast and you're constantly reaching down and touching the motor and you're constantly having to redirect it and you keep missing the fish because you have to stop reeling and reach down and turn on the weed bed and then you pick your rod back up and I just missed the fish that had a lure in its mouth. Does that sound familiar? Does it sound familiar to you, Jesse?
It sounds like every single time I go fishing.
Now, I have the only vessel we have this on is my tinner because it's not really effective to do so on the canoe that we have. I know there are some kayaks who have like a remote, but having a foot control trolling motor or even one on a remote can be nice, but foot control, I never have to take my hand off the reel to touch a remote. Yeah. It's not a high-end unit by any means, but I think which one? The Icon I think I have. Is it Icon?
The Edge?
The Edge. That's the one. Jesse knows my gear more better than me. But I have the Minn Kota Edge, and it's a long shaft in the bow of my tinner, and it's so nice. Even at the cottage this trip, it's in a river, so the current is coming down constantly, and the wind starts blowing at you, and if that's cross current or going a different way, and it can be a challenge just to kind of stay, my 20 feet from shore that I want to be as I'm fishing the shoreline. But having that foot control motor, I was just casting the entire time while controlling the boat with my foot. sitting down in that front seat in the deck, it was perfect. I could enjoy all my fishing, and it wasn't a hassle and a struggle. All my controls are at my feet, not my hands. So it's one of those things where Jesse and I, we talked for a while on wouldn't it be so nice to have foot control? Like anytime you're using that trolling motor, for a long time we just had built a small transom for the bow of my tinner, so you still have to adjust it by hand.
But at least it was on the front.
It was on the front, which gave a lot more control. But yeah, we're no longer Al Lindner in the 70s where the trolling motor is beside like the tiller. We have the technology for a bow mount trolling motor. And once you get that foot control, if you have not experienced it yet, I highly recommend. It is worth the extra money because it'll afford so much more control and you stay on fishable water so much easier.
It's such a game changer. Like I remember the first day when Andrew bought it and we put it on, we went out fishing. We were just like, this is amazing. Like this is what everyone deals with. It's so good.
I finally felt like I had a mini bass boat. Once I got the foot control, I was like, this is now like what I wanted.
Yeah. And again, it is a little bit more of an investment than having, a handheld unit on the back, like on my Sports Pal. You're looking at probably at least double, or not even, maybe even triple the price. So would you say, in your experience, Andrew, is it worth it?
Absolutely. 100% worth it.
Yeah. Because with me, like, for instance, when I was musky fishing last weekend, you have the trolling motor on the back and you're kind of looking forward. So you kind of start fishing sideways in your boat so that you don't have to bend your body every time you have to turn around to adjust the trolling motor. And it's just every time you got to stop reeling, or say you cast ahead of the boat and then all of a sudden you have to like turn or slow down or speed up with the trolling motor.
Blows you.
Yeah, the wind catches the side of my Sports Pal and just swings me around. So you're constantly just adjusting that thing, and it becomes annoying. You almost like hurt your back because you're twisting all the time, just adjusting that thing. And I'm like, oh man, like it's so annoying. And I mean, it's better than nothing. I did a trip last year where it was kind of a backcountry trip, and I just brought my outboard and I didn't bring the trolling motor, and I kicked myself the whole trip because you'd motor up to a spot, turn off the gas motor, and instantly drift away. Like, you're constantly
just how we did fishing without trolling motors before.
Oh, I don't know.
When we used to have, borrow Jeremy's motors or have them on the tin boat, and all we had was that gas motor. I don't know how we fished like that.
We caught fish, but it's just you weren't productive, right? Yes. So like, I have to say, like, remember we were talking about that bass opener trip we did. We were so productive that trip. We caught 80 bass, 70 or 80 bass in one day. It was raining, but we were going along that shoreline. Andrew had us going at a good distance, and we were just casting at every single target, effectively going along the shoreline through little areas.
That was another super windy day.
Yep. And if you didn't have the trolling motor on the front, I guarantee we would have caught less fish that day. So it's about being efficient. Again, it's a splurge for sure. You may already have that on your boat, and you probably think, how could I possibly not have it? Because you're someone that already has it. But if you don't have a foot control trolling motor and you have a little tinner, even if you have a little 12-foot tinner, you can pull one on the front of that, and it can make a big difference. And actually, I was just looking, I don't know, I was randomly on Amazon, and I found sometimes you can find really good sales on the Minn Kota Edge trolling motors for small tinners. They don't have the long shaft, but I found one online. It was like less than $400. It was on sale. But like, you can find some good deals. Again, try to shop local if you can, but you can find them oftentimes that are when they're on sale. And like, I mean, a regular trolling motor, you're looking $300-400, but you could get a foot control for $400 or $500 on sale. So it might be worth the extra money if you're looking to upgrade, because it's such a game changer. Like I've thought about putting one on my Sports Pal flatback canoe so many times that I'm like, nah, it'd be so stupid. It'd be so dumb. You just think you're rolling down the river.
The hardest part about that is purely the deployment, though. Yes. Even in the Sports Pal, you can still sit, have the foot control while you're sitting in your seat, and still control it, or even with the remote. But unless it has auto deploy, which is going to be a crazy amount for a trolling motor like that, especially if put on a canoe, it's not as effective. So deployment of it is the challenge.
Yeah, for sure. I just had someone ask me about putting a spot lock bow mount on my Sports Pal, and I was like, dude, that costs more than the whole canoe and the motor. Yeah. Like a spot lock bow mount it is like, over $2,000. I'm like, yeah, no.
Mm-hmm.
It just gets to the point where it gets ridiculous putting stuff onto a canoe.
Yeah.
I mean, do whatever you want. That's cool. But anyway,
Guys put about 15K into a Hobie, so why not?
15? They wish. Those things are like 5, 6, 7 grand.
No, and all the gear they put onto it. I mean,
at
yeah,
least
they
5
spend
grand.
5 to 8 grand on the kayak, and then they put another 10, 15 grand worth of electronics and stuff onto the kayak.
Just buy a boat at that point, people. You heard it here.
Another thing that for myself, SpongeBob.
Yeah.
So another thing that has been a more recent purchase that I'm super happy about is a nice pair of polarized sunglasses. Now, one of those kind of treat yourself days, and I got a nice set of Oakley's. And I was doing some research on these, and they, I can't use them while driving the car legally because there's so much polarization on the lenses. Now, thankfully, boating, it doesn't apply.
Who cares?
But the reason why I got these is they have, they're a little odd looking for sunglasses, obviously. They kind of look like goggles, like Dr. Robotnik goggles. But they have the side caps. So wind or light isn't coming into the side of your eyes. Even the bridge of the glasses has an extra piece up here. So it will be able to block a bit more light across the bridge of your nose. And the polarizing on these is, like, I've fished for years with, the Berkeley or the Rapala polarized sunglasses, and they worked well. They worked well for the cost of it, for the sake that I was dropping them in the water or scratching them up and using them on a daily basis for everything under the sun. They would last me a year, and I buy a new pair for $30. It doesn't matter. But investing in a nice pair of fishing glasses, and these only come out when I'm fishing, and right now on this podcast, this is the first time they've ever been out of their package pretty much and not been on the boat.
Ooh.
So this is... But they have a titanium cord that clips right in, so I don't lose them when I'm fishing. But these help me see so much better. And if you can turn certain situations that would just be guesswork into sight fishing situations with these. You get an overcast day, you're fishing shallow water, you'll see everything within 10, 15 feet around your boat on an overcast day, when normally you'd only see 4 feet, or right off the bow straight down is the only time you'll see it in your own shadow. But there are times when you can use polarized lenses and just see so much more. And again, productivity goes up. Even navigating the boat, I can see stumps better. I don't see all of them. I still hit them. But you can see, hazards and stuff as you're, with your bow mount trolling motor going around. And even it's nice to see if you have, you're fishing a stick bait that has a chartreuse tail or something like that. It's crazy that you'll cast out 50 feet and you have polarized glasses on and you see that thing quiver down 10 feet and you see it and you see when it disappears. So those things, having a good pair of polarized lenses is vital.
Yeah. And I think it's very similar with the raincoat.
Mm-hmm.
You can get by with a cheap pair, and you might be the kind of person that doesn't care less. You'll buy the $20 or $30 sunglasses, and that's your deal.
You're if you've never had them, go do that right away. For that price point, it's going to be way better than what you've experienced so far.
Exactly. But once you try some better stuff, you will realize very quickly why it's more expensive, because it is very nice. It is hard to go back from buying really nice sunglasses and just seeing the difference from buying a $30 pair. It's night and day. Yeah. It's a slippery slope. It's like whenever me and Andrew go to the fishing store and they have the $1,200 fishing reel, and Andrew's like, "Oh, let me reel that," and I'm like, "I don't want to touch it, because if I touch it, everything else will feel like junk after that to me."
Quick, Jesse, feel this Stella.
That's why I refuse to buy a new reel that expensive, because then everything else that I own is trash all of a sudden.
That's why I don't buy nice clothes, because I can't feel like I'm wearing trash all the time, even though I am. I can't own something nicer. Another thing that has something for years, Jesse and I, we fished the classic Mustang or boy oh boy life jackets, the foam filled ones, bright blue and orange or blue and red, and those are the quintessential life jacket that we think of when we look at anything that was televised from the 2000s or earlier. And it's something that I grew up using. It was a long time before they'd been out for a long time, but it was a long time before I got my own inflatable life jacket. Now Jesse was the first one to get one, and thankfully they come down a lot in price. So it's not going to be one of those things where you're breaking the bank like you would have been paying $300 years ago for these things. Nowadays you can pick them up for as low as $100, especially if you get them on sale. $100, $80 sometimes you can find them, and they have they run off CO2. The benefit of that is you can be safe, wear it all the time. So especially in the cold water temperatures, yes, there may be a foam life jacket in your boat, and you're legally within the law. But if you fall overboard, you are going to have the shock of that cold water fishing early spring or late fall. That sitting underneath your deck is not going to help you. But having something that's already on your body can be a benefit to you. So that's why we really invested in the inflatable life jackets, because we wanted to make sure we were being safe, because we wanted to go out fishing when it was, these cold temperatures. So we wanted to make sure we're safe doing it.
And they're so comfortable. Like I always say to people, like, just get an inflatable. Now, I don't recommend them 100% of the time. We're going to get into that in a second. But if you can get away with an inflatable, we wear them from the beginning of the day when we get into the boat to pretty much when we're driving home. We'll be like, oh, I have to take this off. Like we'll be literally driving half the time, and I'll look over and Andrew's still wearing his life jacket, and we're like halfway home. I'm like, expecting some rain.
I don't think there's been a time when I have not still have my life jacket on while I'm backing the boat trailer back into the boat launch, and I get out of the car, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm still wearing this thing.
They're so comfortable and slim, you forget you're wearing them. And that's a great thing with a life jacket, because like Andrew said, you may have to have a life jacket in your boat. That's the law. But you really should generally, especially if you're in a small craft or you're fishing by yourself, you should be wearing it 100% of the time, because you never know what's going to happen. So many random things could happen. So you're better off having one on all the time and not knowing you're wearing it than having to scramble through your boat in an emergency trying to find your foam-filled one. Now, like I said, I don't recommend them 100% of the time. If you are fishing by yourself in a small craft in big water, or any water really, it's better to have something that is foam, in my opinion, or something that is, you can get the manual inflating life jackets, or you can get the ones that automatically inflate. Get the automatic ones at the very least, or have a foam one. A lot of the kayakers you see, they have full foam life jackets. They don't wear the inflatables because they're more likely to go in the water. Now, if you go in the water and you have to inflate it, that's expensive. It's like $30 to recharge them. So you may be better off with the foam one. But for me personally, I just love the comfort and slimness of them. And I do bring a recharge kit with me now, because you can buy them at the store. Obviously, it's good to have one on, because once that thing inflates, you're not going to wear it. It's just like, it's so big around your head to obviously help your head float. So you do have to have a recharge kit. And I think, Andrew, which one did you get? You got the one at Costco?
I got the one at Costco. I don't remember the name of it. It's like black and orange. I know when I went fishing with Corey Reed, he had the exact same one.
Oh yeah, a lot of people get that one. It's $100.
Yeah, I think it was $80 at Costco. Like that's, again, it's basically the exact same material as Jesse's. I will say, I think you have the Mustang brand, right?
Yeah.
So
I splurged for the actual brand one.
Yeah, it does sit, like mine is almost like two small tubes that come down in the front. Jesse's like folds up really flat, so it's like almost like a fishing vest. Like it's very very shallow and more comfortable. So again,
you do get what you pay for.
You get more comfort with more money.
Yeah, and like brands like Mustang, they do go on sale all the time. I didn't buy mine full price. I did get mine on sale. I think it was like $160. So it's not that much more. And I'd say not that looks matter, but mine looks twice as good as Andrew's and only costs $80. So it's double the price.
I think mine's like Havasu or something like that.
I don't know.
It's not a recognizable brand of safety. I'll say that.
It is though, because it's certified. I don't think they could sell it.
They are. So I didn't make sure of that when I got
it. Does say on the underside, this may or may not inflate. So I guess the worst of the wise is look up some reviews on the brand you're going to get, but you don't have to buy the highest end brand like Mustang or anything like that. I like Mustang. It looks good. They've got a good reputation. The recharge kits are everywhere, but you can get good deals at Canadian Tire, at Costco, Walmart, Bass Pro Shops. You can buy them everywhere. So last time I was at Sale had a huge wall of them. and all the recharge kits were there, and they're easy to decide which recharge kit you need. So I usually just go there and pick up my stuff. So that's what I
And
did.
the one thing I just, as a little tidbit of information, because I know there are some people who weren't aware of this law. For it to qualify as a personal flotation device, which is required in your boat at all times, for each individual on your boat, you have to be wearing, if it's an inflatable style, it has to be worn for it to count as a personal flotation device. The foam ones, they count as it just by being in the boat. You don't have to wear it technically for it to be in the boat. So for me, I always keep a couple foam ones in my boat storage, so it's always with me on the water. It's always a good idea, even for safety. If you see something else in danger, instead of jumping in the water yourself to save them, you can just throw them another life jacket. It's like a life preserver. It floats. So if they're not wearing theirs and they're in a bad spot, you're not endangering yourself. Just throw them the extra life jacket that you have, if you have a large enough boat to do so.
Yeah.
But yeah, just keep in mind that way if it's summer fishing or whatever, and I'm getting a little hot and I take my shirt off because I don't want weird tan lines, I do have other life jackets on my boat, so I remain legal. But ideally, yeah, the inflatable is fantastic. So if I'm wearing shirts anyways, it's no problem to wear that too.
Yeah. And one more thing I will add too is I get asked this multiple times whenever we talk about float suits for ice fishing. Now, float suits for ice fishing, the ones that we're talking about, they don't actually like inflate like a life jacket, but they have basically flotation foam built into the jacket and the bib. So if you fall in, heaven forbid, you float. That's why it's called a float suit. I've had so many people say, "Oh, float suits, they're a waste of money. They're too expensive. You can just wear a winter coat and an inflatable life jacket, on top of it." You actually can't. It literally says, like I looked up on Mustang, which is probably one of the biggest safety, flotation device makers in the world. And it literally says on their website that the inflatables are not designed for cold water. They will have problems inflating in cold water. They're not guaranteed to inflate in cold water. And we're not just talking cold water, we're talking frigid water in the winter when it's minus 30. Do not trust an inflatable and a winter coat to keep you floating. It's not what they're designed for. It's actually very dangerous to do so. So don't do that. Sounds like a good idea. Sounds like, oh, I'm going to save myself a few $100. Don't risk your life for a few $100 if you're going to go on sketchy ice and think that you're all smart because you're dumb. Anyway, rant over.
Another thing, now Jesse can talk a lot about this next one because it's something that he recently did, is talking about tackle boxes. Now, I have gone through a variety of tackle boxes in my life. The one I'm currently using is the Bass Pro Shops 370, and it was a red tackle box. It was supposed to fit 4 trays, and I shoved 7 in there, and it is chock full. So the zipper's ripped. The bag
you need a new one.
It is. Half the zippers don't close. I've had this thing. I got it when I was
as long as I can remember.
Yeah, it's almost been 10 years I've been running this thing, or it may be 10 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. It's insane that this thing is still going. Now, that is something else on my list that I want to upgrade, is to get another tackle box. Because nowadays, I find that when I take my tackle box out of the boat, because it's just a soft bottom, it soaks up the moisture in the bag, the moisture is getting into the tackle trays, and then I'm more prone to having hooks rust, so I forget to take it out that day and actually open up all my tackle trays and lay them out. So having something that, I know Jesse has a couple nice tackle boxes. I think you have the Plano one,
Plano
which
Edge.
has a hard bottom.
Yep.
Comes up a couple inches in the bottom, so if you get a little bit of water in the bottom of your boat or canoe or whatever, it's not going to be soaking into the fabric of that bag. It's got some other cool features too, and that one holds like a lot of bait too.
Oh yeah, there's multiple sizes. Like again, we're not affiliated with Plano, obviously, but I've always liked Plano boxes, and the Plano Edge series. I think it's called. Oh, sorry, it's called the Guide series. It's kind of the fake leather color, and it's got, like Andrew said, the hard molded bottom, which a lot of tackle boxes have now. Definitely worth it to upgrade to a tackle box with a hard bottom. And not only do they last longer because you're not, ripping the fabric on the bottom, but keeps it all dry. And then it has also the magnetic strip on the top. So the whole top of the soft tackle box is just like a bunch of magnets on the top. So if you ever have a lure or a pair of pliers, you just throw it at your tackle box, and they're really strong magnets that just sticks right to the top, so you don't lose them, which is fantastic. Like it's great. And again, not cheap. I think the one that I got is the medium-sized one. It holds 5 3700 trays and then one 3600 tray. There's also a 3600 tray size one, and then there's also the mega one, which is like a huge backpack one, which I think Andrew's eyeing, and I think it holds 9 3700 trays. It's a giant, and again, they're not cheap. I think they started around 175. The one I got, the middle size one's about $200. Picked it up at, I think, Gagnon Sports. I want to say they had it. And again, a little bit pricey, but if you think how long you have a tackle box for, and it's protecting, the stuff that you spend so much money on. $200 for a tackle box seems a bit steep, but if you can get it on sale, it's well worth it in my opinion. And every time I use it now, I'm just like, perfect. It holds just what I need. It does what I need to do. It has a nice waterproof pocket inside too. So fantastic.
And something else about tackle boxes, I grew up using the old like clamshell style, where you open it up and the little trays fold out and our lures are in there. The reason why I went to a soft tackle box with tackle trays, is because I was sick of dropping my tackle box, it rolling down a hill, opening perhaps, and flinging lures everywhere, or at least being a massive pile of hooks all together and it won't even open because it's jammed in the hinges. That happened to me on a few occasions.
You clumsy.
I still am. But going with something with tackle trays, I could have better organization because I could have, this is all crankbaits, this is all jerkbaits, this is all frogs, blah, blah, blah. And the great thing is, if let's say you're fishing out of a canoe and you have a few tackle trays with you, if you flip over a regular tackle box that is one of those clamshell ones, that's going to sink pretty quick. The trays will stay afloat for longer. They'll float for quite a long time, as long as they're not full of holes. And it's been stepped on for like half of mine now. But let's pretend that you take better care of your things. So having that, it will have potentially can protect your investment a bit more, right? It's keeping better organization. You're keeping a lot of your baits separate. Your hooks may stay sharper because they're not just jostled around. You're not going to hook yourself by trying to pull out one Rapala out of a pile of 5 of them. So even safety-wise, there can be a lot of benefits to having a tackle box that suits your style of organization. I know a lot of the pros, they don't even have a tackle box. Their boat is their tackle box. And they have specially designed compartments that they slot all their stuff into. So that is, the dream setup.
Yeah.
But for us, we're often fishing sometimes in my boat, sometimes in Jesse's boat, sometimes in my canoe, sometimes from shore. So I need something that's a bit more versatile to be able to transport. So tackle boxes are important, but if you get one that actually suits your needs, it can be way more enjoyable to fishing, because you're not going to have those little struggles of trying to get your baits out properly and keep them organized and keep your fingers safe from being stabbed.
Yeah. And another thing that's great, I know we got into this a few podcasts ago, but when you have a tackle box with multiple trays in it, you may be the kind of person you're just getting into fishing, or maybe you're not crazy like us and you don't have multiple trays of lures. You may just have those 4 trays with lures in them. That's all your stuff. All your fishing stuff fits into a tackle box. That's amazing. But for insane people like us, like I have 4 shelves here behind me just full of random stuff that doesn't fit in my tackle box. I have, you can't see, but below me there's 2 full shelves from here down. That's all 3,700 trays. And when I go fishing, say like me and Andrew are going to go fishing for pike, I grab my pike boxes. I put them into my tackle box that holds 5 trays.
Yep.
The next day we go bass fishing. I take the pike boxes out. I put in, my bass lure box. I have my frog box, a bunch of, weedless baits, a bunch of this, a bunch of that, my chatterbait box. So it is easier if you do get, more obsessed, where you can just bring what you need and not have random stuff. Like, oh, I'm going pike fishing. I can just bring 1 tray if I need to that has a bunch of pike stuff in it. So it is cool that you can build custom boxes pretty much. So that's cool.
Yeah, it is nice. Most of the time on tackle box, like I said, I like to have like jerk baits in one, crankbaits the other, spoons and spinners in one, and it's organized by style of bait. But I like to have a couple empty trays at home so I can mix and match. Like I said, if we're going back lake and I'm portaging in, okay, well, I'm going to do research to know what water I'm fishing. I want this bait. I can only bring 1 tackle tray. I'm limiting myself to that. But now I can just, I have fun time before I go. I start building my little tackle tray for all, variety of stuff that I want to use.
Yeah.
So it is really nice to be able to have that versatility too.
Yeah. And just to mention my last buy once, cry once.
I was waiting for you to get to this one.
Yeah. So I buy too many lures. And for me, buying lures has nothing to do with actually fishing them. It sounds kind of weird, but sometimes it's just kind of like adding to the collection. You may use it for fishing. You may just buy it to have it. Like every once in a while, I'll go to the fishing store and be like, I don't need anything. Like, let's be honest. I have shelves of fishing lures. I don't need it.
I don't understand that, Jesse. I only have 7 old tackle boxes full of vintage lures. So I don't get that.
It's a different kind of sickness. But anyway, as most anglers do, you buy a lot of stuff. And a lot of the times it's just, stuff to have to sit on your shelf. You may use it. You may catch fish on it, But I got to the point where I have too many musky lures. Like, if I remember, this shelf behind me was stuffed with musky lures, and they were just, I didn't have anything big enough to hold them. Like, I know a lot of people are like, oh, use a milk crate, use a pail, like whatever. And I was doing that for a few years, and it just got to the point where it's like, it's not enough space, or it's just too tangly, and you spend so much money.
Trays, they have the deep ones, like the big game ones. They're great, but they only hold like 6 musky baits.
Yeah, but I mean, if you're putting like a 10-ounce rubber bait in it, that's like one tray. So I get to the point where you have to decide if you're actually going to invest in somewhere to store your musky lures. And what I ended up doing is, after probably wanting one for probably 3 years, and just they're way too expensive, is I got one of those Lakewood musky boxes, and oh my goodness, that hurt to buy so bad. They're so overpriced. They're made in USA. I got the medium box, and it was $400. I think I got it on sale. It was on sale at Gagnon's when I bought it. So I think it was
a long pause after that and slow it down. $400.
It hurts so bad. But all my musky lures, not all of them, but all the ones that I want to take when I go fishing, fit in it. And you open the box, and it holds like 50, 60 lures. And you may think, oh, you're never going to use that many lures. But oftentimes what happens is, we'll go fishing and we'll fish a new lake, and we have no idea what the lake is gonna be like. Is it gonna be deep? Is it gonna be shallow? Like what colors to have? I don't know what color the water is, all this stuff. So you kind of have to bring a bit of everything. At least I do myself, or else I'll go insane. And you always have the lure that you need that trip, but you didn't bring because you didn't have space for it. So I finally bought the stupid expensive box, and I'm happy now. But I'm crying still, really still crying about that.
But he only bought it once, and he's only crying once. I'll have you know, I stubbed my toe and I only cried for 15 minutes.
I'll tell you though, I did use it last weekend when I went up to this lake that I'd never been before, and I used probably 7 lures, and I probably had about 70 lures in that box. But every time I opened that box, I was just like, a little teardrop came to my eye, and I was like,
but let's bring this out. Those 7 lures that you used before you went on that trip, would you have been able to identify those exact 7 lures and bring just them?
Exactly.
Before you saw the water.
Exactly. See, it's really bad when you get insane advice from an insane person, because then you feel less insane. But unfortunately, it's like the blind.
That's the reason why we go in the canoe and I bring my Bass Pro 370 tackle box with 7 trays. Yeah. It's like, Andrew, we're going for largemouth and slop. I'm like, yeah, but what if there's an opening? I could flip a crankbait 10 feet.
I remember this one trip, just a little story time. We went, and it was bass opener weekend, and we were fishing this little back lake, and we were doing okay. We were catching a few here and there. And these guys were in a little canoe in the same area as us, and they had buzz baits. Remember that?
Mm-hmm.
And they were slaying the fish. Like every other cast, you just hear brrr, like a buzz bait flopping across the surface, and a bass would come up and slam it. Mm-hmm. And they kind of paddled past us, and they're like, oh man, like they're crushing the buzz baits. I don't know what it is, but it's just buzz baits. And we were trusting anything else, and we didn't have a buzz bait because we packed super light. And buzz baits are kind of awkward to fit into a tray because they're just big with the wing. Yeah. And I was just kicking myself. I was like, dude, I had a buzz bait in my hand and I didn't pack it. And they outfished us like 10-1. So that, I know it's like anglers are always like, oh, the lure doesn't matter, but sometimes it does. And on those occasions, you're going to wish you had a huge tackle box.
Absolutely. Now, the last thing we have on our list is an ice hut.
Ooh.
Now, I know.
Hey, it's
still
not
summer.
winter yet.
Yeah, it's not winter. And last winter was kind of disappointing for how much we were hoping to get out and how much we actually got out. Winters are becoming stranger and stranger. But to have an ice hut, when you do actually get out on top of that hard water and you start fishing, having something that blocks wind is great. Having something that is thermal and can contain heat and block wind is
so
amazing.
Good. It's the best.
So Jesse and I, we actually, last year, we talked a fair bit on the podcast. We're not going to go crazy into it, but we got a big hut, tent style, that's thermal, so we can actually camp out on the ice. And I got a bunch of foam pads for the flooring and all that stuff to prevent ice from freezing below us, or ice from thawing below us with the heater going and all that. So we won't be living in a puddle. But we're looking forward. We're going to be making a sleepover trip happen this year. Unfortunately, we didn't get one last year. Just too many warm days in the winter, oddly enough. And
we had plans though, and they actually got canceled, unfortunately, last minute because there was not safe ice conditions.
So this time we're going to choose a lake that's so far north that it just can't possibly be canceled.
It's probably already frozen right now. It's probably already frozen.
Great Slave, no. We're going to walk out.
But to add to this point, so for a long time, me and Andrew ice fished because Andrew lived up in Beaverton near Lake Simcoe, and we would just go out and sit on a bucket. No protection whatsoever. We just, bundle up as warm as we could go. And we had some fantastic days. That's totally doable. And if that's all you can afford, because you can't, get a hut or anything like that, that's doable. Unfortunately, we don't control the weather. And most days that you get off to go fishing, it's usually the worst weather. It's freezing cold. You wouldn't last very long in a bucket at all. It used to be back in the day. I don't sound like an old man, but back in the day, we used to go ice fishing in April in Lake Simcoe. And we'd be out there in like just jeans and like a hoodie sometimes. And we'd be pulling jumbos out of the ice. And now there's no safe ice even close to that time. So usually when you're out there, it's February and it's ice cold. And what ended up happening is I ended up getting this little hut, one of those little flip over plastic bottom huts with a little non-thermal, little tent. And it was cold.
Yeah.
Like it would block the wind, yes, but it would be cold. We'd have the heater on full blast.
Yeah, it was so cold that I remember the thing that would get us off the ice every single time was my feet are frozen. And that you have an hour walk back minimum to get back to the car because we don't have machines to get us out there. So having something that allows us to stay comfortable all day, in our case now overnight, multiple days to stay warm on the ice is a huge game changer. Because before we would we drive up there, we walk out, we've missed the morning bite despite our best efforts, and then we're fishing all day. Middle of the day, our feet are freezing, the sun still hasn't gone down, and we have to leave because we are too uncomfortable. Now we can actually get there in the evening, set up, fish the night, fish the morning because we're already set up. We can stay comfortable all day. We can then fish the next evening. We can actually go ice fishing on the opportune times, which we're excited about.
Yeah. And again, we're not talking about a giant hut. It was was a bit of an upgrade from what we were going to spend. But we ended up getting an old model on sale. And I think we didn't spend more than, it was only $500.
Yeah, I think it was 500 plus tax.
Yeah.
So I mean, plus tax.
That's not terrible. And that's not like a flip over or anything fancy. That's just like a big thermal tent. And again, it's big to fit in the car. But once you set that thing up, it is spacious inside. You have the heater running. Another thing, buy once, cry once, is get a little, like a buddy heater with a propane attachment. So you can run a big tank off of that.
Yep.
Oh, it's comfortable. You sit out there in your chair. It's beautiful.
There's nothing nicer than when you're on the ice and you're like, so it's terrible when you're on the ice and you have your heater and everything, but you only have like 1 or 2 pound cans. And you're like, I got to keep it low because I want to stay out longer. And she just, it's enough to keep me on the ice, but not comfortable. And you have, really as little as possible use versus when you drag a 20-pound tank out there in your sled and you hooked it up. I'm like, let's leave this baby on high all day.
It is a calm feeling when you don't have to worry about how much propane you're using. You can just let it blast, full blast. We end up turning it down because it gets so warm in there, but it is nice for sure.
Yeah. But that's kind of the main things we wanted to talk about. And there's so many other things that you can think of that, buy once, cry once. It's good sometimes to invest the extra money, even if you're looking at your watercraft, things like that. If you're just getting a canoe, get the best one you can get. Getting a boat, I need a new one because mine keeps getting giant slits in it. Get the best one you can get. I did at the time. I need to do better next time.
Yeah.
But even with baits, if you're getting the bargain barrel ones, some can work really, really well. Sometimes it's worth it to get something that will cast a bit further, maybe more accurately. Maybe elicit a few more strikes. So see what you can spend your money on to get. And again, if you put some thought into your purchases, you might be impressed with the benefits you'll get by having something that you spent a bit more money on, like that rain suit. You stay comfortable. You're going to fish way more days because you'll be comfortable even in the rain, or you're going to be warm on that ice later on. So just something to keep in mind. That's our unsolicited advice. But hey, you're listening to our podcast, so deal with that. And speaking of our podcast and people's thoughts on it, we have a couple different reviews, and we're going to have Jesse read a couple of those for us if he feels up to it. If not, I'll take over for him. We'll see if his voice holds out. Got the black lung pop.
So anyway, we look at a lot of our reviews. There's this podcast statistics service that we use, and it tracks all the reviews and all the ratings and stuff. So apparently on most of the streaming, like Spotify and Apple right now, we have a combined almost 450 5-star reviews on this podcast. So that is amazing. If you have left us a 5-star review, we thank you so much. It's actually, every time I look at it, I'm like, that's crazy, because some of the podcasts that are quote unquote bigger than us have way less reviews than us. Not that it means that we're better or anything. I mean, it's kind of. But anyway, I thought I'd read some of these reviews.
And that doesn't mean stop. Please, let's blow these other guys out of the water.
Oh, pardon me. No, exactly. So here's a review on Apple Podcasts, and some of these people, they just have random like account names, so I'm not going to read it because it's not even a name. But here's one from the United States.
I see what you mean.
Yeah, I have no idea what that is. So actually, funny story, these reviews, of the 3 that I'm going to read, 2 of them are actually from the United States. So not only do we have a lot of listeners, actually more than 80% of our listeners are in Canada and mostly in Ontario, but from coast to coast in Canada. But we do have a lot of listeners that are in the United States of America. So to our American listeners, good day. Just kidding. We're not Australian.
Howdy, y'all.
So here's a review from this random guy. He says, great show. 5 stars. I've been bass fishing for 2 years now, and I've tried listening to other fishing podcasts, but none compare to yours. Really great podcast. So thank you. Oh, I have listened to other podcasts too, and some of them are trash. There are a lot of good ones out there, though. So I'm not talking about you.
That's why Jesse and I endeavored when we started it. We're going to do it and do it, hopefully, good.
Yes.
So thanks to your ratings, we can see that we're succeeding. Thank you.
Here's another review from the United States. His title is 5 stars. Awesome fishing content. Love the show. Great content. I live in northwestern Montana, near the Divide. It's supposed to mean something. I don't know. We have lots of lakes with similar fishing conditions and species. Love all the great info, especially pike strategies. Keep it coming. Funny enough, our pike fishing episodes on this podcast, of our 2 top downloaded episodes, they're both about pike fishing. And we have some more coming because, like Andrew said, no one talks about pike and everyone loves it. Even if you don't want to admit it, you do like it. So we'd like to thank Mr. Montana for that. Maybe it was Joe Montana.
Ooh.
Maybe. Here's our last one. This is from Dan. I just thought I'd read this one because this is pretty nice.
Is a really nice one.
Yeah. Well, why don't you read it, Andrew?
All right. It says, great podcast. I started wanting to learn how to fish 2 months ago when my dad passed away. He and I would fish when life and schedules would allow. He and I were very close, and with life becoming even more hectic with kids and work, etc., I decided it was time to have a hobby. I feel very close to my dad when I'm outshore fishing in reservoirs where I live, about an hour north of New York City. I have a 1-hour commute each way to work, and your podcasts have energized me to try this hobby. I haven't been dismayed yet when I've lost a lure, like on my first cast yesterday. and I became a gold member in Patreon. Aw, thank you for your show, because you two make me feel like I could be successful at fishing, and I appreciate that greatly. I can't wait for the day I can share a photo of my first catch, but until then, I will continue to enjoy your podcast. It's a great show full of details and humor. Thank you. That is awesome. And absolutely, please, Dan, when you catch something, send it up on Instagram, send it to us. We would love to see your first catch. I hope it's a big one. I hope it's, well, regardless, it'll be a PB. That's awesome. We're gonna help Dan catch his personal best.
For sure. So we do appreciate all of our Patreon members that help support our show. Like we always mention, there are some expense to running this weekly show, and there's a lot of effort that goes into it on both our parts to produce it and put it forth every single week. So we do appreciate all of our supporting Patreon members as well. We also appreciate everyone who listens every single week. We do get a lot of messages on Facebook and Instagram and social media and all that stuff that people tell us how much they enjoy it. So we do appreciate that. But before we end, we actually have a surprise giveaway.
Yeah. So me and my hosting abilities, I failed you. I'm sorry. I forgot to do this earlier in the podcast.
Boo.
Yeah, I accept it. But I want to give a big thanks to the Mr. Transmission out in Peterborough. So they were very generous. We actually had a little fishing meetup that Jesse and I put together a few weeks ago, and they had given us some prizes. So we were able to give away a couple gift cards there at the event to some fortunate fishermen there that were there in person. And we actually have an extra one now that we're going to be giving away to one of our Patreon members. So someone who's already entered into these awesome giveaways. Again, it's easy for yourself to enter. Jesse's going to have the link below. So if you wanted to get in for a chance to win this, if you're hearing this podcast, as it's released, the name hasn't been drawn yet. So get in there and you have a chance to win a $50 gift card. And that is to the Great Canadian Fishing Store. So we've talked a lot about a variety of different awesome small bait manufacturers from around Ontario, from around Canada. And this store has a lot of these different guys on it and their products. And so if guys and girls, whoever's making them, kids, there's some kids involved in some of these too, in these little companies. And so this is a great website that kind of houses a bunch of these together. And it's $50 gift card online. So when we draw the winner, we'll be able to email that gift card directly to you and have fun spending that money, because you're going to get some awesome baits from that store.
Yeah. So we would, again, like to thank Mr. Transmission for that in Peterborough. We're going to put a link down below if you're ever in Peterborough and you need transmission work. You know who to call.
It's funny because I'll give a shout out to my buddy Norm who works there. But it's funny because he was telling me that he likes fishing. He really enjoys it. So he started playing our podcast, but his boss there, Mr. Transmission, isn't much of a fisherman himself, apparently, but loves listening to the podcast. So big thanks. We really appreciate your support for both the event and for the giveaway for this podcast episode. So thank you guys very much for that.
Yeah. And just to add one thing from our event, we had a little meetup in, it's got to be 3 weeks ago. We would like to thank, and people know who they are, but people who made donations that went to the Fishing Frenzy Foundation. All the money that you put forth for the donations, we actually sent off to Mike at Fishing Frenzy, which is an organization that helps kids and children learn how to fish. So your donations have been passed along. We do thank everyone for that. And hopefully next year, we're going to have another event. I think we're going to do like a spring pike fishing event.
That'd be fun.
Yeah, let us know if you can message us on Patreon or social media if you'd be down for like an early June or late May non-long weekend pike fishing tournament.
We'll
I think
do
that'd
better
be pretty
with our
fun.
Planning on this next event, I promise.
Yeah, but I think pike would be pretty fun because no one really does pike tournaments anymore. Yeah. So I think that'd be cool. So anyway, that's all I have. But yeah, thanks everyone for all their donations. It all got passed along, and you guys know who you are, you guys and girls. So we do appreciate it. So
excellent. Now, before we end the episode, we have, as tradition states, the quote of the week, and I'm hoping that Jesse has something more than just a cough in the microphone for the quote of the week.
Here's my quote of the week. If Andrew and Jesse are going camping, make sure to buy a bilge pump. It doesn't rhyme, but it's true.